Hello, welcome to Tech Days Online, extra special DDD flavour edition. I'm Rick Hepworth, and with me is the marvellous Chris O'Dell, who has already delivered her session at DDD, and unfortunately I wasn't able to watch it. I delivered the intro, bigged her up, and then ran away. So I'm really pleased that we've managed to drag her off the shop floor for a short while, and Chris is going to talk to us about the key points of her session. So, Chris, you are lead for build and release engineering at Skelton Thatcher Consulting, which sounds very much like DevOps, which is close to my heart. So your session today was all about giving the dev the pager, getting them involved in the pain of deployment and why that's a good idea. So let's start with, why do you think it's a good idea?
Why do I think it's a good idea? Because I think that running your application in production, the operability of it is the final piece to ensure that your application is actually doing what it was told to do. Okay, so you build it and you throw it out there, you let it fly, but then you don't check up on it, you don't make sure it's growing as it should do. So I do think it's the final feedback loop on that. So I think that the developers who create it should most definitely hold the pager and ensure that the operability of their application is hardened to the real world out there.
So as the IT pro who normally has to catch the ball that the devs throw at me to deploy, I actually quite think it's a good idea as well. But do you find that you get resistance from both sides when you start to suggest the devs get more involved in managing production and the production guys ought to get more involved in handing off responsibility to the devs?
Of course, yeah. I mean, in a situation where there hasn't been a huge amount of communication, which is probably where this comes from, there's been a lack of trust for some time between those two groups of people. So yeah, there's always some kind of disbelief that maybe the devs aren't capable of doing it, so the ops aren't willing to give up that little bit of the, because they're responsible for the stability, right? Mm-hmm. So of course they're resistant to it, and the developers themselves are resistant because they get to sleep soundly at night, right? Why would they want to suddenly give up their weekends and evenings to look after this thing?
So when you're going about this, do you try and, I was going to say prime the devs. Do you encourage them to put things like telemetry in before you hand them the pager, or do you find that actually it's better to sort of rip the Band-Aid off and go, here you go, you're now in charge, and they learn the good practices as they go?
Well, I think if you did the second one, it would probably end up with flames and fire and everything else. So definitely maybe push a little bit of metrics-driven development first so they get aware of that extra cycle of information coming from production and familiar with introducing more telemetry into their applications. Because if there is some there in a company that has this split already, it won't be focused on the applications because the people using it are the ops people, and they are interested in things that are different from what the developers would be interested in. So yes, that first bit definitely has to be in.
Okay, so we've got to start by instrumenting our app. We've got to start by talking to the ops guys and asking if we can, and working out what the appropriate metrics are. And maybe run that for a few weeks or so, and let the devs get a feel for what kind of information is coming back to them?
This is such a big transformation for everybody. It probably takes a little bit longer than a few weeks before you give the pages to the developers. But so I think that period of changeover where the metrics going back and forth is going to increase the conversation between these two groups. That wall will start getting chipped down through the whole of the metrics.
So in your experience, is it better to try and forcefully remove the wall and sort of staple the teams together, or do you find that actually by encouraging that conversation and exchanging data like telemetry, you can encourage people to chip away the walls themselves? I
personally prefer the second one, but depending on the company that you're making the change in, you may need a bit of the other. There's a few different tactics for getting this kind of thing done, a lot of different ways of organising teams to kind of kickstart, depending on what the rest of the business is feeling like. So I've seen some cases where a DevOps team is used as a initiator. Okay. And that sometimes works if that then expands and shares its knowledge throughout the company as a kind of like a seed. So it can be done that way, but I personally prefer the one you talked about where you encourage through metrics, through if you've got a CD pipeline, through fast feedback and changes and that kind of stuff.
Okay, and have you sort of worked in organisations where you've helped them do that and seen that work in practice?
I've been part of it rather than not. I'm relatively new at the consulting, so I've actually been through these changes. So I'm here to give a kind of ground floor kind of
See,
way of
that
seeing
sounds
it.
better, because to be fair, I mean, you get a consultant and they go, well, I'm telling you to do it this way, but actually the voice of experience, we went through this process.
Yeah.
So as somebody who's gone through the process then, are there any tips that you'd want to call out, things that maybe didn't work that you found that you should avoid, or things that did work that were really, really great for you as a team member?
Yes, the telemetry thing, you will get better at that over time. There's a lot of information out there that you can do from the ops world to learn from. I don't know if you've heard of OODA, that's from the RAF, kind of the way of dealing with alerts and how to put the right information on a dashboard for reactions and things like that.
Okay. So what's OODA stand for?
I've forgotten.
So we've been throwing homework at people through the sessions. So your homework is to go and Google with Bing OODA and come back to us when you've looked it up, and then we'll talk a bit more. So you sort of built your dashboard, and that works really well.
Yeah, but it's an iterative process. So that's something that I've learned, that you can't get it right first time.
Right.
And accept that you can't get it right first time, and it's an iterative thing. You'll get better at alerts as well, knowing the difference between information and calling the fire brigade. Which, if you're the one with the pager, you'll be the one that wants to calm down those noisy alerts.
Okay.
And again, you won't get that right first time. You'll need to iterate and improve that. The cognitive weight and impact of being on call, don't underestimate, if you've never done it before, how much it can weigh on a person. So even if you've got the most stable system and you never expect any kind of call out, just being ever ready is quite a drain. So managing that in people, there's a big healthy side to being on call that needs to be looked after. I think John Willis has done a lot on burnout. He is the co-author of DevOps Handbook.
Okay, so that's sort of my responsibility as a manager, is to ensure that you're
so.
okay, you've got the page, but don't worry, it's not a hand grenade, it's not going to go off, and if it does, you can always call me to help.
Exactly, the support must be there, because I've learned the wrong way that you need it.
Okay, so a lot of organisations have got more than just dev and ops. A lot of organisations have a more traditional. We've got developers, they write code, they throw it over the wall to the testers who catch it and look for the bugs, and then when they're happy, it gets lobbed across at the IT guys who deploy it. Have you found that you need to sort of scrub that divide between dev and test before you're able to take the step of scrubbing the divide between dev and ops, or do you think that can all be done as part of the same spectrum of change?
I am not quite sure. Again, I think you'd have to sense a company to find out what they feel is their biggest bottleneck at that point in time.
Okay.
For if they're finding that a lot of stuff ends up getting, do your flow analysis first and find out what's getting stuck and where. Then maybe it is test that needs to be merged in first. Maybe they're mature enough and have seen it themselves that they could try and do both at once. I think you'd have to sense it.
Okay. So yeah, do your homework, and everyone's different.
Yeah.
And do you find that? So I'm guessing that the first pager being thrust into somebody's hands is obviously going to meet resistance. Do you find that resistance gets lower as the devs get more comfortable, that they maybe encourage the other devs that there isn't so much to worry about? Yeah,
I used a phrase at the end of my slides where I said take pride in your applications, and I think that's a really big thing, is that when they start being able to have a lot more influence and understanding the operability of their system, that they'll be proud of this application, and that is infectious.
Okay.
That's infectious. You'll find other people wanting to have this same kind of... I've seen transformations where a legacy system that no one wanted to touch turns into, through kind of monitoring and operability, into this thing that everyone wants to be part of. How come they've got the cool stuff? How come they've got the cool tools? Because, they built them, they worked on them, they took pride in the application.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're sort of encouraging that sense of ownership, sense of craftsmanship, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay. And do you think that there are skills you need to teach the devs to be able to do that, or are you finding it is more of a cultural thing?
I would say it's probably a bit of both, because culture feeds into everything. So unless you've got the culture to support you, it doesn't matter what you learn. As we all know, if you end up in the wrong company for you, it won't happen. The things to learn, there is so much stuff out there about being on call and operating in production. I would definitely go and sit down and have some excellent chats with your ops teams. They've got so much information. There's a book called Web Operations that came out way back, which I recommend reading. And there's just whole conferences built about it. There's so much.
Okay. I can sense a Tech Days Online longer session coming on for that one. What was I going to say next? So I mean, DevOps is a bit of a cultural buzzword at the moment. And I find it interesting with the stuff that I do around sort of tooling and automation, that actually if you start picking it apart, we're doing things that really we've done for a long time. We're just, again, blurring the lines and putting a lot more communication across the top. Do you think that the whole sort of taking ownership, holding the pager is that falls into that camp, or do you think that it is a genuinely new approach that people haven't really tried before, and we are actually sort of building a new approach as developers and IT and technologists?
I think you're right. I think you're right where you're saying it's an evolution of things that we've already done. I think when you've got a small company, everyone does a bit of everything, and when you get big enough, you seem to think, I know we can split this up, and that's where the problems start, because you've taken something that kind of everyone had ownership of, and everyone had ownership, but everyone had sight of, and now breaking it down into little silos. So I think, yes, it is a return to something that we're improving upon and making better.
Okay. And if I was a non-technical manager and you wanted to encourage me to adopt these processes within your team, how would you go about that from being in that team that got the benefits? What sort of messaging would you give me to sway my decisions?
It's very similar to the messaging that would be given to continuous delivery. It's like continuous delivery plus. Effectively, you're taking that feedback loop right out. So it's about risk management, it's smaller changes, being able to take more, try new things in terms of features that you want to try out. Because if you're on call, I would hope you've built in things like feature flags and stuff, so you can have more resilience and turn things off and on. And I would also say this is probably a terrible reason, but it seems to be going that way, the industry. That the people are realizing that it's not so. The business model of having 100 engineers to 10 ops people just doesn't work.
Okay, so I found it very much an easier argument to have. If we're adopting cloud, then there's an inherent need to change our processes and be more, I don't know, fleet of foot maybe to say. Have you seen these benefits in sort of more traditional on-premises solution, the sort of slower speed IT that maybe isn't using cloud?
Yes, much again with what they end up doing in that case is they end up focusing on response systems. Because if you've got, say, a packaged thing that goes out to a customer, you probably still have first-line support for that. So those systems, getting feedback and metrics and stuff for those first-line support, so what issues are being dealt with, what things we can fix in that point. So maybe even spending a week here or there on first line, that kind of thing. So it's not quite having a pager, maybe, but definitely being on the front line in some way for the same reason.
Experience the customer's pain, so you get
empathy,
more of a feel for it. Yeah, okay. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, bluntly, because I think that this is certainly your first DDD South, isn't it? Is this the first DDD that you've spoken at?
No, I spoke at one in, is there one in Cambridge? Yes.
There is, DDD East Anglia.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Because one of the things that we're trying to get across is DDD is not just one event, it's lots of events. And I want to ask all the speakers sort of a two-pronged thing as to why you think people should attend DDD and what benefits they get out of it, and why you as a speaker submit to speak and what you get out of it. I'm sort of interested in your thoughts on those. Okay,
the first one, why would you attend DDD? Everyone's going to tell you it's free, right? And it's on a Saturday, so you don't even need to, we may need to talk to somebody about getting permission, but not your company, okay? So if you're in one of those unfortunate places that are a bit like, it's not sanctioned training, there's that freedom. The other is because it's a very community-driven event, these are the people who are speaking, the people who are meeting are peers. There's none of this kind of extra level of separation with the what are they called? Professional speakers that tour around. I mean, we're just regular people as well that have just decided to give a talk. So it's like a really, 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 really big, polished up meetup. It's fantastic. So that's why I think you should come, because it's people from having experience just like yourself sharing information. As for a speaker, well, I want to talk to those people that have come and want to see the people on the ground floor. It's very casual, which I like. If there's too much ceremony, I start to get really nervous. So I do like that it's casual. And yeah, I think it's great beginning speaker kind of place to be, because I think this was the Cambridge one was the second place I ever gave a talk.
Okay.
So very, very helpful and receptive.
It's kind of refreshing, because that's what we try and do. Okay, well,
Cool.
that's great. So I'm trying to think if I've got any more questions for you. I don't think I have. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that while you've been thinking, God, you know what, I wish you'd asked me about this, because I've got a burning desire to talk about it? Goat herding in the Himalayas, arming bees.
I don't know, really. I don't know. No, I've been, like I said, get nervous quickly.
So, just before we finish then, so you're a DevOps consultant. You work for a consultancy, you do DevOps, that counts for me.
Fine, I am a DevOps consultant.
I do similar stuff. I find it quite exciting. Do you enjoy that, going into different organisations and seeing how they're tackling the same problems in different ways?
Very much so. Although obviously I get a little bit nervous. What I tend to focus on is being in-team mentor effectively. So I'm not. I'm more like someone who will come and see how you're working right now, learn and feel what you're doing right now, and try and see if I can help bring some of my experience and push you forward. So I'm very people-focused on this change.
Do you find you get a lot of satisfaction out of doing that?
I do, very much so, very much so. I feel that what I see is people get stuck and have trouble kind of figuring out how to go next. And it can help to just go a little bit of a push, and then they're so much happier.
Okay. And are you on Twitter or social media that if I get stuck I can reach out for a hand?
You can, yeah. I'm Chris Ann O'Dell on Twitter. So yeah, do that.
Okay, we'll see if we can get your followers up.
Thank you.
Well, Chris, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for popping into our makeshift studio with myself and DJ Beebster on camera.
It's pretty.
And thanks very much to you all for watching.
Thank you.